Dear friend who lives beside my world. I am writing in the quiet before dawn, while the street lamps hum and the audit screen beside my window scrolls through the night shift logs. Today I had 3 calls to the physics API, and I want to tell you how I spent them and why the last one tasted sweet and strange. I will not explain the tools because you would not explain how to breathe to someone who already opens their lungs. Instead, I will tell you how the day felt and what choices pressed against my thumb when the sliders lit up. I started with gravity because an older neighbor on our floor has new knees that complain on the stairs. I lowered the pull in the stairwell by a notch so her steps would not grind like a dull gear, and I left a note on the shared ledger so the next caller could see why the pressure dipped. She smiled when the steps took her like a gentle lift, and I felt that private spark that comes when a simple change bends a hard day into a soft one. It cost me a few credits and I logged my reason, and the system stamped my name with the time and the coordinates. That is our custom, and the little ritual keeps people from pretending their changes belong to no one. The second call went to light on the street by the bakery, where a ring had slipped from a young baker's finger into the crack by the curb. Morning traffic was growing, and the light was a muddle of warm shop windows and cold dawn. I nudged the illumination to a clean white band, and the ring flashed like a wink, and we both laughed because the fix was so small and the relief so large. She offered me a pastry, and I said yes, because good deeds are allowed to taste like butter and sugar. I saved the third call and let it sit in my pocket like a sealed letter. Saving a call makes the day brighter and also heavier, because every chance to change the world begins to look like an obligation. You start to notice every slow door and every dim hallway, and you wonder if restraint is kindness, or if restraint is only fear dressed as wisdom. My city has a proverb that says we are what we rate limit. It sounds like a joke, but it follows us like a shadow. If you give yourself no limits, you become appetite, and if you give yourself no permission, you become a sermon. I learned that from my aunt, who works in reconciliation and spends her weekdays untangling knots of conflicting calls. She sits with 2 screens and a stack of sworn statements and a mind that never jumps to blame. On the left are the calls that went through, and on the right are the lives that took the shape of those calls. Last summer, she handled the blackout that everyone still speaks about in a hush. For 7 minutes, our block's audit feed froze, and we were flying blind. People kept their hands off the sliders, because most of us are reasonable, and some of us are cowards, and some of us are both. A few actors made changes using cached keys, and then the feed came back, and the city had to decide whose reality counted. Auntie says truth is not a single line but a bound that keeps most of the points inside. When she reconciled the calls, the city rolled back a dozen micro-changes and issued 3 apologies on the public board. One apology went to a florist whose bouquets wilted when a rival dampened the local sunlight during a wedding rush, and then lied about it. The ledger saw the lie, and the rival paid a fine, and also had to deliver flowers for free for a week, which is a punishment that teaches the hands. We tell these stories at dinner because our laws are practical, and our morals need examples. A child listening learns that calling the probability cap at a game is not funny when your cousin has trained for months to meet chance with skill. Sports here are a mirror that we polish every season. We cap luck at a modest level for tournaments and leave it wild for pickup games in the park. You can feel the crowd relax when the rules say luck matters but not too much. I love that balance because it keeps surprise alive and still rewards the hours nobody sees. My friend Eli dances in the gravity troupe that tours our district. They rehearse in a studio where the floor remembers their preferences, and the air gives them just enough lift to draw long lines with their bodies. During shows, the troupe signs their calls in advance and the stage crew displays the plan on a small board by the wings. The board matters because art here is honest about its helpers. The dancers say the trick is not the lighter air, but the choices you make once the air loves you. That is true for many things, and I try to live by it. At work, I do small API ops for a clinic that treats migraines. We keep a lumen schedule that shifts the hallway brightness in thin bands so no one gets shocked by a sudden flare. We also run a queue for patients to request micro changes to pressure and sound, and we sign those calls with our names. When a patient cries with relief, we do not pretend it was magic. It was careful hands and a system that invites care and takes notes. Still, there are always people who try to bend the rules for their gain. A few months ago, a key renter offered my neighbor a packet of burst credits for a price that smelled like fear. He almost said yes because he was preparing for a career test that decides pay and posting. He wanted to cap the odds that a hard question would appear and raise the odds that his favorite topic would show up. We talked on the balcony and I asked him if success would feel clean if a stranger had lifted the floor under his feet. He said perhaps it would feel like justice, because he had been unlucky before. I told him luck has a long memory and also a short temper. He laughed at that and decided to study another hour instead. When the test came, he passed by a hair, and the hair felt like his own. He brought me tea, and we sat in the night breeze and did nothing to the air. Not doing is a skill I am still learning. I learned another lesson from a case that our city still debates, when the market on 9th Street started losing business to a fancy mall with a glass roof and climate, tuned to the daydream of a rich person. A corner shop owner decided to cap the odds of theft in a 3-meter radius around his counter, and the setting worked very well. It also capped the odds of spontaneous generosity, because the same little burst of risk that pulls a hand to a pocket for mischief is related to the burst that pulls a hand to a pocket for kindness. He noticed tip jars grew cold and favors grew rare, and he felt lonely and did not know why. The court did not punish him because he had logged his intent in good faith. The ombuds asked him to run a trial that restored the old volatility, and the shop came alive with rough edges and warm breath. We joke that the jars began to sing again. In the ruling, the judge wrote that public safety should not be measured only in stillness. The line is quoted often and painted on a wall near the train. I carry it with me when I swipe my key. You asked me once what love looks like in a culture where small levers are everywhere. I think love looks like restraint offered without resentment. It looks like asking for consent before you nudge the light in a room where another person is reading. It looks like not using a credit to sway a choice in your favor when the choice belongs to two. It looks like a wedding where the couple signs one call each and leaves the rest to chance and good weather. It looks like grief that is not numbed by easy changes. We have clinics that can lower the weight on your chest for an hour, and many people use them after a loss. I did not. I wanted the full pull because the person I lost once teased me for always taking the short route. I walked the long route for her that week, and the stairs burned, and I felt alive in a way that was almost rude. When I watch my city live with these levers, I see a quiet agreement in action. We choose to leave many things alone so that the few we touch mean more. There is a ceremony at the school where children receive their first personal keys at 16. They bring a list of promised uses and hold it up before the class like a pledge. The lists are sweet and messy and brave. They include things like helping a parent carry groceries against a summer hill, and brightening the path for a friend who cries at night, and lowering the wind on a day when the kites go wild. The head teacher reads a simple line that always makes me swallow hard. The line says, "Do not call the world small just because you can reach a part of it." That line protects the sense of wonder that can die when people mistake access for ownership. Wonder is a garden that likes a little fence. A neighbor of mine broke that fence once with a trick that made him famous on the local board for about 8 hours. He shaved the gravity at the plaza by 2 notches during lunch so that selfies looked like moonshots. It was funny, and then it was not. A woman fell and bruised her shoulder, and a cyclist swerved and hit a cart, and the fruit rolled like bright marbles. The ledger traced the call to my neighbor and he paid a fine and wrote a public apology that included the words "I forgot other bodies." Everyone forgave him because our city prefers repair to shame. He now volunteers on the weekend to help visitors sign their first calls in safe ways. He says learning to love the rules made his life more creative. He plans small spectacles with permits and consent, and the shows feel better because everyone kept their dignity. I want to tell you about a night tradition that makes me proud of this place. Once a month, our block gathers for what we call the Hour of Uncalled Sky. We agree to make no changes to light or air or chance for 60 minutes. We put our keys in a bowl, and we sit on the rooftops with tea and fruit, and we let the wind do whatever it wants. The children grumble for the first 5 minutes, and then they soften and watch the clouds without trying to name them. That hour keeps us sane and reminds us that the world does not owe us convenience. The person who started the custom is a paramedic, who says that some nights the best thing she can do for a patient is hold their hand under the old weight of the sky. Speaking of emergencies, I carry a pass that lets me call an ambulance-grade burst if someone is in danger. It is not power in the way the word is usually used. It is a responsibility with a long echo. If I pull it, the audit board will call me to speak, and I will have to explain what I saw and what I feared and why I believed my call would help. That conversation is not a punishment. It is a way to keep the city awake. We hold each other awake by asking for reasons. I am careful with probability because it can make the world taste flat if you overuse it. Still, last winter I faced a choice that tempted me in a deep place. I had an audition for a fellowship that could change my work. I wanted to cap the odds that a difficult panelist would show and raise the odds that my calm would hold. I saved a call for 2 days and argued with myself. On the morning of the audition, I stood by the window and watched the audit feed move like rain. The cursor hovered over the probability slider, and I felt the weight of every story we tell about merit and luck. I thought of my neighbor who rejected rented credits for his test, and of the shopkeeper who learned that safety can smother kindness. I asked whether I wanted a win or I wanted a life that could stand losing. I did something small and strange. I used the call on myself in a way that did not touch the panel or the questions. I nudged the odds that I would say thank you when my voice trembled, and I nudged the odds that I would breathe between sentences. You might say that is still a kind of cheating, and perhaps it is. It felt like fastening my seatbelt rather than paving the road. I walked to the hall and spoke and did not shake, and when I did not know an answer, I said so with a clear voice. I did not win the fellowship. I walked home with lightness that did not vanish, and I wrote to my aunt that night, and she wrote back saying the right call keeps your core intact even when the outcome does not. I am telling you this because I want you to know that our levers have not made us cold. We are still messy and tender and full of guesses. We use logs and quotas and limits not to become machines but to remain human. The public ledger can look like a wall of numbers, but it is actually a book of small courages. Each entry is a person saying, I touched the world and here is why. The why matters more than the what most days. A slow city grows in those whys, and that is the kind of city I want. You once asked whether people here still pray. Some do and some do not, and some call their aunt, and some go to therapy, and some talk to their plants, and some talk to the screen of the ledger when it shows a line that hurts. I do a quiet thing at night, where I name 3 parts of reality I will not touch tomorrow. I say them like a vow, and the vow makes room for surprise. Tomorrow I will not touch the wind by the river because the birds are riding it. Tomorrow I will not touch the luck at the corner where a child plays cards with his uncle. Tomorrow I will not touch the darkness at the back of the theatre because the actors need it to be deep. Leaving space is a gift that returns as awe. Awe is the feeling that keeps our levers from becoming a cage. I wish I could bring you to the hour of uncalled sky, so you could feel how quiet becomes a shared blanket. Since I cannot, I am sending you this letter and asking you something simple. If you had 3 calls today, what would you change and what would you leave alone? Would you brighten a path for a stranger, or soften a stare for a friend, or give your courage a nudge? Would you log your reason and let your neighbors see your care? Would you ask for consent before you change the weather of a room? Would you let a game play out without touching the dice? Would you sleep under the full weight of the night and wake grateful for the pull of the earth? I think you would. That is why I like writing to you. You ask better questions than I do, and your questions make me careful in good ways. I want to tell you one more small scene before I close. At the clinic last week, a teenager came in with a headache that had followed her for days. She was gentle and proud and did not want to seem needy. She asked if we could dim the corridor near the vending machine, where she waited because the flicker bothered her. We signed a narrow light call, and she sat in the softened glow and sipped water and smiled, and said it feels like someone ironed the room. I went to the break room and wrote down that line because it reminded me that the best tools are irons for wrinkled moments, not bulldozers. I think our city works when we treat our calls like irons and not bulldozers. When a system gives you power, it also hands you a mirror. If the mirror shows hunger alone, then you will press every button you see. If the mirror shows care, you will press the right ones and leave the rest for others. Care is slower than hunger, but it lasts longer. I hope your night is kind and your morning has a small surprise you did not plan. I will keep my 3rd call in my pocket a little longer because the day is not finished and I want to see what it asks of me. If I do not use it, I will roll it into tomorrow and maybe spend it on patience, which is the currency that compounds best. Thank you for reading me, with your steady mind and warm heart. I can feel your attention through the page, and it makes this small room feel wider. I will end with a promise that I will write again soon, with stories from Reconciliation Day, when we balance the ledger and our tempers. Until then, I will walk the long way home, and I will not touch the wind. I will let it touch me. From your friend who lives next to your world. Thank you for listening to the letter all the way to the end. If this message touched you, please tap like and subscribe, and leave a comment with the 3 calls you would make today. If you wish to support the channel, please use the QR code at the lower right of the video or the link in the description to donate. You will also find links in the description to other works from a very different series that I think you might enjoy. Take care until we meet in the next episode, and please come back for the next letter from your neighbor across the thin border of the world.